Hello and welcome to this Building Domain session as part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit, Lillestrøm 2023. Thank you for joining. My name is Sheila Karailam and I will be your moderator today. So today's session is titled An Introduction and DfMA. Our session will be hosted by David Ivey, who is the Building Domain Steering Committee co-chair. This session is scheduled to last 90 minutes. This session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For the online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of this session. If you do wish to ask questions, please use the chat box in the control panel. For those of you in the room, kindly please try to keep the background noise to a minimum, and do raise your hand if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, and one of us will bring a microphone over to you. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent. And standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. So please take note of our antitrust code of conduct, which is up on the screen now. And on that note, I will hand over to David.
Thank you, Sheila. Okay, so again, welcome to the DfMA session. We're going to start with Mr. Richard Kelly, who's going to give us an overview and introduction to DfMA. Got a few slides, don't you, Richard?
Indeed, yeah.
And then we'll introduce our panel. And once we've done that, we'll look for some questions. We've got some that we've gotten from the community that we can start with. So, Richard, why don't you take us out?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Kelly. I work for buildingSMART International as the Operations Director. However, I'm not here in that capacity this afternoon. I'm here to talk to you about DfMA, which is a topic that my co-panelist Birgitta Schock and I have been working on for a few years, and I hope to be able to explain a bit more about it to you.
Oh, you want to introduce the panel now? We can do that.
Okay. That's what you said, yeah.
Yeah, why don't we spend a couple minutes on each? We've got Wawan, Vanessa, Lex, and Birgitta. So just give yourselves a couple of minutes. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Wawan Solihin. So I am representing buildingSMART Singapore, and I'm here as part of panelists here to try to answer whatever that comes up in relation to DfMA and a lot of things that happens in Singapore for DfMA. I have to admit that I'm not really the expert of it, but I actually have done some research. I focus on the data part, interoperability, IFC, as well as looking at certain automations to be done within that whole workflow of constructions and DfMA, design construction. DfMA. And that's, I think, my short introduction.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Tang from ACE PLP that provides digital delivery services. And like Wawan, we are part of buildingSMART Singapore. We are here to share today more of what is happening in Singapore for DfMA. It is part of an overarching strategy that we have for taking the built environment forward in Singapore. We call it the Construction Industry Transformation Map. And that covers several areas, including advanced planning and design. So you've heard a little bit about CornetX in some of the other sessions, and that has to do with digital delivery workflows. And another aspect of the construction ITM is the advanced manufacturing and assembly. And that is the implementation of DfMA in Singapore. All right, so we'll be covering a little bit more on that.
Thank you. My name is Lex Ranjsin. I'm from the Netherlands. I worked as a general contractor since 2006 until 2018. Busy with coordinating between the design and all the suppliers, just getting the models ready to send them to the suppliers, and then the suppliers can make their BIM models to deliver the right products. In 2018, I applied for the Open BIM Award with a project,
and that project won that year. Oh, it's on the back. Yeah, that project. Richard was there last week, and he took this picture. And he
I
said,
took that photograph from my train window as we went past. Yeah.
So I think my whole working career, I'm busy to get everything ready to send to the suppliers. So that's why design for manufacturing and assembly comes in. You said lean too. Our company did all the lean trainings that you can imagine, I think, with all the engineers to do the planning of the real project and also of the engineering. So a different style of building structures with lean, and the information flow. Yeah, that comes in if you are responsible of the different stages, different departments of a company. How do we manage all the BIM files, but also all the other files in different processes? So that's my introduction.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Birgitta Schock. I'm an architect, owner of a company in architecture for 20 years right now. My background is beside architecture, the AEC industry when it comes to lean and integrating project delivery. And I guess it's a couple of years back when we put this topic on the table twice in this community, Building Smart, together with others in the room. I remember quite well, and I'm here today to catch up a little bit what happened in the past years, where the discussion is currently in Switzerland. Maybe others from other countries can contribute on the status in their country, and where we are heading to, maybe also talk a little bit about new drivers, because I think we have a new relevance in this topic, and I'm very curious on having this discussion today.
Okay, thank you. I'm already wired for sound, thanks, Birgitta. I'm going to stand up as well, because I think better standing up. Fantastic. Welcome, Fabian.
Hi, nice to meet you, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Fabian Scheurer. I'm a professor for digital building technology and fabrication at the Munich University of Applied Sciences. And I'm also managing director of design to production in Zurich, which is a practice building digital process chains from design to production in architecture since 2007. So we are basically translating design data into fabrication data for complex projects. There's one in Norway, actually, since you're there, which is the Kilden Performing Arts Center in Kristiansand, in case anyone knows.
Fantastic. Welcome. And I'm glad you can hear us, and we can hear you beautifully well in the room. Okay, I'm going to just go through some slides to promote discussion. So there we are. That's us. That's your panel today. As I said, I took this photograph from the train in Amsterdam a few weeks back, and the reason I took it is because I really like that building. It's one that Lex worked on, the Ponsteiger building, and the reason I like it is because it's the best example I have seen yet of open BIM being applied to a design and build of a facility, a building, and really making the use of DfMA. And I'm sure there are other examples as well. And the reason I was so excited about it is my career prior to me at buildingSMART involved a bit of DfMA on big portfolio assets, airports actually, where it's very important to be able to take work off-site because of the constraints of working on-site for all sorts of reasons. And we had some really good success. You know, got some really great examples, got really passionate about them. But the problem was that every project you had to do a really hard sell with the project leaders and the fund holders and all that sort of thing, because it's DfMA is seen as being a bit niche, it's a bit risky. So if you didn't win the argument, the DfMA approach didn't happen. Therefore, you ended up with a traditional approach, which took longer and probably ended up costing more in the long run. And you didn't end up with such a good building either. So all the opportunities for improvement were being lost each time. And part of the reason I came to buildingSMART is because of our aspiration to have interoperability so that you can make the right decisions because you've got the right data at the right time. So that was a really good example for me when I saw it a few years ago. And as Birgitta said, we've tried to get this DfMA initiative off the ground at buildingSMART for a while now. And it's one of these things where we've presented at every summit until 2017, 2018. And then we put an activity proposal together in 2018, and we shared it with the community. And everyone said, it's great, yeah, we love this. But no organizations, no companies came forward and said, but we want to now commit, put some money down, put some resource down, and actually work through a proposal for DfMA. And therefore, it's been dormant for a while. But lo and behold, people have been talking about DfMA again. And we were asked, actually, we didn't volunteer, we were asked to come on and talk about DfMA at this summit. So we're happy to do so. So that's a little bit of my background, which also helps to explain to you a bit about what qualifies me to talk about the next bit. And I'm very happy to turn this next bit into a conversation, actually, because this is a small, intimate group that we have here. But I'll start off with the definition. I guess it's my definition. What is DfMA? A process applied to a facility, a system, or product that determines the optimal way of making the parts and assembling them. So I'm saying, it could be a whole building, it could be a new system such as a combined modular wall, or it could be a combined heating element or something like that, or a product. And I'm happy to be challenged on any of this, by the way, if we want to turn this into a conversation. And I'm saying it works best in conjunction with lean, and lean is the eradication of waste and also the variation of output. I know the variation of output is actually Six Sigma, but I'm lumping the two together there. So waste, is in all its forms, and that applies to achieving flow, both on-site and off-site. And flow is important throughout the construction industry if we're going to get things working. And I'm also saying that it's a core ingredient for successful asset management. And by asset management, I mean the holistic ecosystem of assets and the whole life cycle approach to value and decision making. So that's everything from the early stage objectives, the asset plans, and then the design, construction, build, dispose. Before that, of course, commissioning, repurposing, and actually being able to reuse is going to be really, really important in the future as well. So it's about having the data to do that. So for DfMA, simplification of components and assemblies for manufacture, combination of component functionality to reduce the assembled parts, standard interface definition content for connecting the elements. It's all there about challenging traditional thinking, as I was suggesting at the beginning, and access the data at the appropriate level of detail at the right time. And by that, I mean, you don't want all the data all the time, because that isn't going to help anybody. We can talk about some of that in more detail in a moment. And then for lean, communicating value from a client's perspective. And the client can be the next person in the supply chain. And what that means is pulling stuff through, not pushing stuff through and the hope it will be used and getting lost and wasted and broken. It's like pulling stuff through. And being able to achieve single piece production flows. And that means being able to make variety quickly, because you're making one at a time, but you're making it efficiently down a flow line. And that means you need reduced changeover times within any manufacturing systems you set up. And then reducing waste in 8 areas. And traditionally waste is waiting, overproduction, rework, unnecessary transportation, inefficient movements, inventory. Come on, Birgitta, help me out. A couple more. That's all right for the top of my head. Oh, and lost ideas. That's the loss of knowledge. That's another area of waste. And by doing that, it then it was able to illuminate the off-site manufacturing opportunities if you've managed to establish a design that can achieve flow. And then for asset management, we need to be able to achieve the intended performance of the asset for its whole life. And that means, how it's going to perform thermally, how it's going to perform functionally, how it's going to, last for the amount of time it needs to, and, be identified when things are wearing out before time, etc. Understanding what's critical. The management of risks associated with an asset can be then challenged. And that then challenges the risk dichotomy of engaging specialists early, because DfMA is going to be about engaging specialist suppliers early. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, very briefly. Being able to identify replacement and repairable components, optimizing whole life cost, safety and demolition, and then optimizing this reusability and recyclability. So this is the engagement risk dichotomy. Traditionally, people don't want to engage a DfMA specialist because you get locked into that particular solution. You then lose all the choices you have as a design team to be able to go out and to the market. But so you lose that commercial tension. And also you may be perceived as the client as prescribing the solution, which is taking risk. But what it does give you is the off-site and flow solution that a supply chain can provide efficiently, and you're able to reduce that schedule duration. The opposite of that is, if you engage the DfMA specialist after early design, then you end up with a non-optimized solution because you're actually trying to then get a specialist DfMA person to work on something that's already been designed beyond the point that their facilities and solutions can take, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but we can test the market prices thoroughly, but you end up with a non-traditional, you end up with a more traditional design. And then it's about connecting the data flows. So as I've already suggested, actually, I'm probably repeating myself a little bit here, organizational objectives through to the whole operation of design, build, operate, maintain, and replace. We need to have interoperability. We need to have the data that's available in software agnostic fashions so that that information is available to make the right decisions at the right time. Now this is where, we can, as I say, we can debate this. The DfMA strategy that we put forwards, and it's actually a strategy that I've used in real life as a client organization with real supply chains. But as I say, only able to do it successfully on a project by project basis, not being able to roll it out, generically across the whole portfolio. Is first of all understanding the benefits assessment. It's down to money. You need to be able to determine that a DfMA approach is going to give you value benefit overall, because actually taking work off site initially looks expensive. So that then drives the legal framework for the particular project as well. Design for manufacture, questions like, does this part have to move? Does this part have to be separate to the other? Can there be a way of combining it? Design for productivity, thinking about how it's going to be made and all the rest of it. Logistics, modularity is a huge aspect of the DfMA in the construction area, and so on and so forth. And then design for assembly. Actually, gravity is a really good tool for us when designing for assembly. Trying not to go against gravity is a really good core principle, and so on and so forth. So these are, it's like a progressive approach to DfMA that we're putting forwards. So what we're here really to discuss today is to discuss our thoughts on DfMA, discuss what the blockers are, but also think about what we're going to do next. Are we going to collectively, anybody that's interested, write a strategic paper to try and convey what we're saying more succinctly in a way that other organizations, other people can understand and then want to join in and help us make the world a better place regarding the use of DfMA. So that's that.
Perfect.
That'll do.
Excellent primer. All right. We've got some questions that we called from various sources, and I wrote down some, but if there's any in the audience right now or online, you can send them online and Sheila will relay them to me and we'll get those questions answered by our panel. So I'll throw it out to you all first. Does anybody have any questions that come to mind right off the top of your head after Richard's presentation? I can't even log into my phone. Is that going to be a no? Okay, because I'm ready to go with questions anyway. So, all right. So barring some other questions coming in, we'll start with some of the stuff that we have here. And I think the first one could be maybe for you, Richard, but really for anybody. So we talk about DfMA and lean and these things and these ideas about how to do things better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, whatever it may be. Where's that information kind of stored and how is it retrieved on a project by project basis? Like, is there like for, is there a book somewhere, or a storehouse of information that other firms can draw on, or is it learned by each firm and kind of brought to each project over time? And if you have some thoughts on this, we'll just pass the mic down.
I think it's also a change of process. If you say design for manufacture, then you're probably asking the architect to design a building that can be manufactured offsite, or you need knowledge of the supplier to give it to the designer. These are the thickness of the walls, or the details of the products. And then you probably need the general contractor too, because the general contractor decides which supplier should we use in this project. So you need the integrated strategy for your project as a real estate developer, because if you're a real estate developer, you're hiring an architect, but you also have to hire the general contractor already in that stage. You can decide you pay him or not, but the project where I'm involved, they make it like a pre-design, then they go to different general contractors asking for their details, or their suppliers, or their mindset for that building, and then they make a team, like for only the most important suppliers for the outside wall or the prefabricated structure, and then you need to discuss about the details to add it to the design of the architect, and then evaluate all the BIM files and coordinate with different disciplines. Like if you choose for prefabrication, it has an effect on the MEP, or if you choose for a prefabricated outside wall, it has an effect on the details of the construction too. So you need somebody who has the overview of all the suppliers.
So how does that unfold for on a typical project?
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm going to paint now two worlds, right? So as a traditional architect and thinking about design for manufacture until now, it was like explained, you have to work on a kind of an agreement, how you can involve different stakeholders early on. So it's an early stakeholder involvement, which is always a little bit a difficult situation because it depends a little bit on the client's model. So let's say if there's a private client, it's much easier to get this stakeholder involved from the beginning, although struggling maybe with the payment. But if it's a public client, it's quite difficult because you can't ask when you are in a public tender process for help from construction companies or from other different stakeholders to get the answer, because this would, not be a fair competition anymore. So this is the situation we are in the middle in right now. But the world is changing. And why do I say that? From an architect's perspective right now, and this is my understanding, and this is maybe also the reason why the topic is on the table again, we have another issue, and this issue called disassembly. So if we talk from this perspective and we start again to talk about design for manufacturing and assembly, we need immediately integrate the discussion about the disassembly, which brings me back to we need different design criteria. And I have a colleague on the call. This is Fabian Scheurer. We know each other for a long time, and I know his company is doing a great job on that. But until now, we always did it on a single piece, on a single project, and I think this could change by this new enforcement by the disassembly, by the reuse of material. So maybe Fabian, you can just jump in.
Yeah, I can try. I think DfMA is more a method, isn't it? So, I mean, if you think about DfMA from an architect's perspective, maybe the first question is the project assembled from something at all, or is it completely built on site? And if this decision is made at one point, and it's made more often now because prefabrication finally becomes a hot topic in AAC, maybe also because of mass timber, which is inherently prefab and digital already. You need to start thinking about how things come together. And probably you don't even need to have all the fabricators on board early on, but you need someone who is able to abstract the market of prefabricated components in this certain area that you're looking at. So that might be an engineer, might be a consultant like us or someone else. And I think the main question here is how to integrate this thinking with prefabricated components into the workflows. Because as of now, we're not used to that. That sort of is the main issue. We're not used to that, both in terms of the methodology of how to design things that are made up from components and assembled on site. And we're not also used to what's going on when it comes to the digital workflows that are used. I mean, productization is also a hot topic or a term that was coined a few years ago and is around in the industry. But so far, we can only work with products if they are static, like the toilet seat, yeah, and copy them in. But we're having a hard time working with components that are dynamic, parametric, and sort of built for the project when it comes to digital workflows as of now, for example. And I think that could be one of the interesting topics for building smart.
Okay, thanks. Well, because so we have a question, I think, related to this. Mirbeck, did you have a question, or were you?
Made a recommendation or
No, I'll bring it over to you.
Hi. So, if you're talking about prefabrication, then you need to call prefabricator, contractors, manufacturers, also be involved on this initiative, because they know how to build, they know how to manufacture. They bring the buildings or building parts on the site, and they know what does it mean to bring piece of like a module from factory until, I don't know, on the location on site where you have to go through all these traffic regulations, dimensions, and I guess sizes of models usually depends on the availability of the road that you will pass through, the bridges and the passages and so on. I had a chance to work for several prefabricated companies, and we, when the client always wanted to have something like modular construction, like a house built of several models, we had to calculate if it's feasible. First of all, feasibility studies you should consider, and reusing of materials a little bit tricky currently, because the house owner, of course, calculates money first of all, but at the same time wants to have a new materials. I don't want to use let's say used insulation from some old house that is probably hazardous material anymore, and probably have some other issues. Reusing timber, I guess there is no specific regulation if you are allowed to use it in new construction, especially in manufacturing. Steel will be easier, but timber is a different case. Yeah.
I mean, I think we'd all agree with you that, you know, getting the off-site manufacturer involved early is the right thing to do. But the fact is, because the information is not available, typically the program director of a capital build or the project leader of a capital build, they don't do that because they don't think it's worth their while to do it. They think it's too risky, and they certainly don't think about the capital expenditure combined with the operational expenditure, which actually most of the asset's life, and thinking about it two together. But I know Wawan and Vanessa have got some big experience of this in Singapore, so let's give them an opportunity.
Yes, I was just going to share that, that the Singapore experience is a sort of the opposite of what Birgitta described, which is that our government is the one that is, prescribing the use of DfMA technology in Singapore. And there was a question about, where we can find the resources. So these are actually available, and they are publicly available resources as well. You can have a look at how, the roadmap is for Singapore to adopt DfMA technology. Some of them come from like policies point of view, where, in procurement specifications. They actually write that in to the contract documents. That's one way. Another way is that because DfMA implementation requires a lot of manufacturing off-site, and that takes space, which is something that Singapore does not have a lot of. It's a problem for us, right? And what the government has done is that they've developed these integrated construction and prefabrication hubs with a 30-year lease term, right? To support the supply chain to produce the DfMA components. So that's one of the things that, that from a policy point of view, you can drive that adoption. So writing it into your contract specifications, supporting the supply chain to produce the DfMA components, and ensuring that there is a pipeline of DfMA projects using DfMA technology. So in fact, I would say that it's sort of the opposite. It is the public projects, that have the DfMA. I think it's easier to do the DfMA technology. One of the largest developers, residential developers in Singapore, is a government agency called the Housing Development Board. And 80% of Singaporeans live in public housing. And these are like really nice public housing. They're not run down at all. They're very well maintained. And the idea is that, every Singaporean should have a chance to own their own homes, right? So we got to find a way to make them affordable to the masses, right? We shouldn't, and I think this is especially an acute problem for Singapore because we just don't have that much land. And we've got to house, the resident population as well as, people who come in to work temporarily, right? So how do we build enough housing for everybody? And that, is a solution that that the Housing Development Board, has been trying to pursue, which is that, that the housing projects, the public housing projects actually adopt a lot of DfMA technology like precast concrete and prefabricated bathrooms, which, ensures that these projects are delivered more quickly. So, in fact, in terms of resources, there is also, what BCA has done is that they have listed, various types of technology that you can adopt to make it so that it's considered a DfMA, project. You've got things like precast concrete systems, mass engineered timber, prefabricated, pre-finished volumetric construction. So basically, they finish one component of it off-site and then they bring it on-site and to just install. Right, so on and so forth. So there are different kinds of technology that is being listed, and you sort of have to adopt them for public sector projects.
Yeah. So just to add to what Vanessa had mentioned, actually, it's not just public housing projects. There are a lot of even residential projects now using prefabricated, especially in Singapore. There are a lot of push for PPVCs or prefabricated, pre-finished volumetric constructions, as well as the PBU, which is a prefabricated bathroom unit, so the entire unit, or the PPVC is part of the unit, completely assembled, finished, everything off-site, and then just bring it and install it and join. So I kind of. So Singapore kind of started with premising, because we have so many high-rise residential buildings, and most of the high-rise residential buildings are kind of typical, right? There are a lot of similarity. So the values to have prefabricated units like that is immediately obvious. So the government really is pushing that as part of the digital delivery system, integrated digital delivery initiative that we have. But also they do something that is kind of interesting. I found out actually quite recently, I talked to someone and I asked, how actually do we do that? Because we have we have seen a lot of new developments actually using PPPC private and public. Public usually is kind of easier to understand because, government say, okay, I want to do this, and you have to just do it. But private, it turns out to be that Singapore actually put that in, when they sell a land, they actually dedicate certain land, saying that, okay, if you bid for this land, you have to develop using DfMA. So the requirements is right from the beginning as they actually sell the land. And therefore you see that actually kind of everyone has to do it. And talking about resources, I think we are kind of beginning to collect those informations because all these things only happens like just a few years, right? So we are collecting a lot of those informations. By having the hub that Vanessa mentions, that actually helps to streamline the whole process. Not only that we develop or construct the components in Singapore, sometimes actually it does it overseas, and then they ship it to Singapore. And this hub basically also act as a logistic hub. For them, we bring it to the construction site in time for installations.
Can I ask Vanessa and Wawan a question then? Yeah. So has the Singaporean government taken the risk and made this mandate because they've taken a leap of faith, because they believe this will work, or do they actually have data that demonstrates that the approach, the DfMA approach, is quicker, better, cheaper, safer?
A good question. Actually, I don't have the answer to that, but I believe they have done that study because typically the Singapore government, how they do things is they study it and then look at overseas, look at different places who have done that, look at research before they actually make a decision. So I think they probably have the data, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what I know how they operate, definitely they have seen that values. And also, as I mentioned, because we have a lot of high-rise residential buildings, which is repeatable. So that value immediately comes and assumed to be beneficial.
Because on the Pondsteiger building, I think I'm right in saying, Lex, that you actually generated the ability to capture the data in order to make different decisions about how you were going to design and build that particular building. Is that right?
It was a restart of a real estate development. So my company bought the project from another real estate developer who couldn't get the right business case. So they were looking at this building and they said, we can only build it cheap enough when we do it really fast in 2 years without temporary scaffolding around it. So we need really to think in prefabricated elements, not in on-site production. So I think it's also cheaper at the end if you do it prefabricated. But I think it's depending on your country and depending on how the roads are, how much the labor costs on site. So I think that's also.
But you used IFC on that project, and therefore you were able to make it more of a luxury building than originally intended.
Yeah, we were already using IFC, but we made the building twice. So one time the architect made the building, and also the suppliers, they also made their models for sending it to the factory machines. So that's. Birgitta?
Yeah, I think what this discussion shows me once again, if there is a pain, you find a solution. Yep. And this is what I'm a little bit heading on, because if I listen to you, Singapore has limited land area. You have this really hard restrictions, so you can't expand where you want to. Your project has a pain just to build it, I think as soon as we got a pain, we can come up with a solution which could be supported by design for manufacture and assembly, maybe also thinking about the disassembly. But as long as we have other options, it does not seem to have really an incentive to do it on a volunteer space. And we can prove that it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better. It could be even disassembled and reused, which we are in the middle of the discussion to get the certification for products which has been used and brought out from the building and reused again. Yes, there's a lot of legal issues we have to solve, but this could be solved. But if you don't have a pressure, then it's really hard to get implemented. And I would wonder for the people in the room what their experience is, because this is very interesting. This is why we have this panel, to get a better understanding where is the pain. As long as we can work then on the pain, we find a technical solution. We can use IFC, we can use data structure, we can use everything. But what is the pain?
I don't want to forget Fabian either.
No.
Fabian, do you have anything you want to add? We should have a cardboard cut out for you.
Sorry, it was hard to hear. Was that directed to me?
No, I didn't want to leave you out, and I just wanted to see.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just didn't want you to feel like getting short shit.
Yeah, maybe just one remark. I think we do have a lot of pain already because productivity in the building industry hasn't developed the past 30 years. I only know the figure for Germany. We have an error rate of 15% of the building cost, and we're running out of personnel that wants to work on site due to the development and an aging society. So I think we should actually urgently think about prefabrication, which involves DfMA from my point of view.
I want to mention a good example of design for manufacturing, because we had a design from an architect with some natural stone around the building. And the supplier, they made an offer for 250,000 euro to deliver those natural stones and to put it on site in the right position. But then one of my colleagues, he was looking at the model. It was not really detailed. They decided to spend like 10,000 euro to make a little bit more detailed BIM model. And then they send that model discussing with the supplier about the details, just like one day or one afternoon, what details should we use. And then they changed the model a little bit more detailed, and then they made a new offer, and it was 150,000 euro cheaper than the first offer. And then they first couldn't believe it, but then they said, yeah, it's completely clear what we should produce, and we calculated it really accurate, and then we were saving 150,000 euro by spending 10,000 for.
You consider that lean?
What?
You consider that lean or design part of DfMA?
I think it's design for the manufacturer. So if you just listen to the manufacturer, what are the details, then you should design that. If you decide not to listen to it, some architects are a little bit.
Things
not all, but
yeah.
If you just ignore it, then you will probably pay double. So you can.
Then it will be TPO.
Microphone, Bernard.
Then you can say TPO. That's the most important aspect for a manufacturer. If I know how many bolts and nuts I have for this, and we can extract it from model, then we know how we pay.
Yeah. Another example of big windows, like with the measurements of like 6 meters or 3 meters, I think. It was 3 meters and 5 centimeters, but the profile length of the window was produced in 6 meter lengths. So they have to cut like 2 meters and 95 centimeters, and they have to throw it away. So if they change the building a little bit in different measurements, then you can save a lot of money. So that's why you should listen to what's available in the market.
So I'll bring this up now. You guys keep beating me to the questions. So we've talked a lot about, I think, the benefits, but are there any downsides? Or, Birgitta, you talked about pain points, and so did Lex. And I'm just wondering if anybody has anything that's been a roadblock or a stumbling block, or things that DfMA is not good at that affect whatever cost, schedule, etc.? Anybody? You got something?
Is there anybody else in the
wanna sit up
audience
here?
that?
Okay.
Just only one example, but it's different from construction. It's a vacuum cleaner, and they're of course using DfMA because they need to build the parts, and some parts for changing was difficult because it's the material worn out, and it broke some pieces that previously was easy to change, but now I had to disassemble the whole thing to get a small piece, and that of course it's a cost-effective, time-consuming. It's negative pinpoint. That's what I wanted.
So being cynical, that's the manufacturer want you to buy a whole new machine. Is there anybody in the audience that's had experience of DfMA giving them either a benefit or a disbenefit? Or maybe another question to ask is, just to bring you in, is there anybody who's desperate to use DfMA either on their projects or in their assets, or provide materials or product through a DfMA approach and just can't do it because they can't get the acceptance to use it?
Yeah, I've got that. That's what I was going to ask next. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, one of the things I have experienced, I work in material supplier, a concrete material supplying company. And then we have the case of precast companies, for example, that they have a challenge of distributing, the different pieces they are requested if they don't fit in the, for example, standard trucks or standard logistics. So that depends also on the city. There are a lot of local constraints regarding the transit, transport, etc., size, etc. And then I would say that the earlier the precaster specialist or precast companies can be in the process, the better solution can be proposed also from logistics point of view. Because from maybe architectural point of view, this is what an architect wants: certain size, certain elements, thickness, etc. But then when you translate that to transport, there is a lot of cost. It depends on the density of the materials and so on. And also, something you forgot, the quantity of anchor systems. That's because mostly they are metallic, and they are not they are inserted into these precast pieces. And the more we have to use, of course, the more expensive, the more material, more carbon footprint, etc. So I think it's more the early engagement of the precast specialists is the better for the process.
Thanks, Morgan.
Sort of thinking along the lines of implementation, we have a question online. For Singapore HDB projects, is the government giving out a specific number as a milestone, like a minimum number of PPVC units that need to be installed on a project, or percentages in terms of reducing cost or time targeted? You guys want to take that?
I do not have that numbers from HDB. I don't think they have released any information about that. But the main driving force is really in terms of PPVC, because in public housing, I would say probably more than 80% are typical, right? Those same. So every unit will have to be PPVC. That will be the requirements. And HDB, or Housing Development Board, has a lot of experience with prefabrications. In the past, it just prefabricated components like the walls and things like that. But now they are pushing for the entire unit or half a unit, depends on the dimensions. One of the pain pressure to Singapore is not only the land is limited, but also labor is critical. So we want to reduce foreign labors because it's getting difficult sometimes. And especially in COVID time, for example, we were really badly affected because suddenly there were no workers coming in, or some workers, the entire dormitory has to be locked down because of the COVID. So therefore, the value of the DfMA becomes a lot higher, because then you can actually manage a lot better in terms of having all those things ready in store. Yeah.
Another question online about whether BIM can help with DfMA, and I think, Lex, your example was really apropos to that. I mean, obviously, doing a better model. Any other examples that anyone has or can think of? I mean, I think prefab's a really easy thing. We're doing a ton of prefab in our practice back in the States, so it's the one part of DfMA that maybe we get more than others. But any other examples or thoughts on Anders? Sure.
We talk a lot about carbon dioxide reduce in these days. How do you see the prefabrication and the carbon dioxides reducing? In my experience in Sweden, we often say that the time schedule is the most carbon progressing part of the building.
Do you want to crack at that? Or just agree and move on?
I would agree to that. And I mean, the big upside of prefabrication is that you can parallelize things if you manage to plan them properly and then have some proper lean management on the project. Things can happen in parallel and basically meet on site just in time. But that would mean that you have to have a pretty good idea about what you're doing, how long things take, and you need the right partners to basically get everything just in time on site. But if, then yes. And the other thing is, I mean, if you manage to collect that data, it's also pretty straightforward to find out how much carbon you spend on transportation or other things there. So I think both in terms of making things quicker and shorter, and knowing about what's actually happening, that would be a nice idea. And of course, digital models are part of it.
Yeah.
You know, it makes me think, one thing that we push for, well, I don't know that we push for, but one of the things we were really interested in for a long time is integrated project delivery. And at least at HOK where I work, doesn't get done a lot because, frankly, we don't control it, right? We don't have a lot of say as to whether we're going to work in this kind of contractual framework where we have a three-party agreement with an owner and a construction team. And the project that we're working on now, we do a lot of prefab, but I think one of the big benefits is that, you know, if you can get that, and maybe IPD is a little bigger here. I know we just don't do a lot of it, but on the other side of the pond. But it really, it's got some downsides too, but it brings people together to talk at a stage of the project when we don't generally get input from contractors and trades, and it's super helpful in all these things. I think one thing it seems to be doing, at least in our example, is it's drawing out the process, right? It's design's taking so much longer, but the idea is that when we actually do things, you know, we're going to have a more error-free, correct, hopefully less wasteful when we're talking with trades about how to build, you know, labs that are repeatable and insertable into our buildings. So, you know, is there a lot of IPD this side? And do we think that that helps with DfMA? I'll hand it down.
Well, actually, I think it's all getting together. You know, if we are talking about Lemis curve, we have to talk about the integrating of project, and integrating of project means at the same time integrating the project delivery. Of course, we have to do that, and what wouldn't be easier if you have the knowledge from the construction early on, because then we have not just the knowledge about the product early on, but we also have the knowledge about the transport, about all the other requirements. So this is about bringing the requirements in the early stage. I completely agree, and let's say IPD or integrated project delivery can support, but it's not the driver. I don't think it's the driver. It can support. I think definitely the drivers are coming from other points, as we discussed it a little bit early on. And I agree totally. I mean, just thinking about carbon and net zero and things like that, because if we prefabricate something, we can also optimize the research consumption early on. So we don't have to do this stupid thing, cutting steel, you know, instead of making it a little bit shorter. And to be very honest, this comes and brings me from my profession to the design criteria, which will change, of course. Not saying that we lose any creativity. I guess we gain, but this is a complete mind shift. But I see there's a question.
Richard, did you have something that you want to add? Well, I do. I could talk about this all day, actually, which I'm trying not to give everybody else a chance, but I'll be happy to come back on that, yeah.
It's a short one, but all this we talk about now is what all this summit is about, the information infrastructure and getting that together. If we can do that, then we have the possibility to handle prefabrication as a real part of the construction industry.
Vanessa, did you have anything to say? Yeah.
In Singapore, we call it the integrated digital delivery, and there are actually 4 components of this, and it's actually all mapped out. There is one part which is digital design. That addresses the question that we have online is, can BIM help DfMA? Certainly it can. I think it would be the starting, in fact, one of the starting blocks of adopting DfMA technology. And then there is digital fabrication, that aspect where we take the manufacturing off-site, and that I think is also made possible because of the use of BIM, right? That allows you to coordinate with the manufacturers off-site. And then there's digital construction, like what you've mentioned, which is that you can integrate that with schedules and you can animate the sequence of construction, and that helps you to become more productive at assigning your resources and controlling the timeline for the construction project. And the final segment of integrated digital delivery framework in Singapore is actually digital asset delivery and management. And that is one of the aspects of digital delivery that, I think Singapore is very interested to develop further in that aspect. And we can see a lot of great work coming from, like, for example, JTC in terms of implementing, asset delivery and management in that aspect.
Can I, just because my interest or expertise is in BIM, the questions, can BIM help, actually is probably the wrong question. Actually, BIM is a critical part of it if you want to be successful. So in Singapore, BIM has been used, but I think the next challenge that I'm actually looking at is to have a seamless integrations from the designs to manufacturing. I have done some studies comparing to what the manufacturing industries have done. I have a paper right now under review in a journal, so I don't have the details to share, but we actually look at that, and BIM becomes a very critical part of it, and IFC and Open BIM definitely will be very, very helpful, because that will go across different tools. Because right now the situation is still that you may use BIM, but the design may use one tool, and then the manufacturers may use, in fact, probably very likely manufacturing using a different tool. So they may have to remodel it, and that actually is kind of not very seamless. And in fact, if the manufacturing can give all the constraints in the manufacturing, and that become part of the design or made available to be part of the design, that will be actually perfect.
Sounds like a job for IFC, right?
Exactly.
Eugene online. Okay. Just go ahead and finish your thought, and then get the Eugene online.
Right, and at the same time, there are also digital workflows that allows, a two-way bi-directional exchange of information between the BIM and the manufacturers as well. So, I think that would really help that process that Wawan is talking about.
All right, is Eugene there?
Yes, I am. And
Fabian.
hello, everyone.
Was Fabian or Eugene?
Yeah.
Eugene first. Okay. Go ahead, Eugene.
Yes. Sorry, Fabian. I'd like to add to what Wawan and Vanessa actually mentioned that in Singapore since 2018, when IDD was introduced, I must say that the design consultants, mainly chiefly the architects, have been trained in a way that they have to design with DfMA in mind. Very early days when we started to use precast, for example, they would design a cast in situ building and try to force the precast in, and then that caused the cost to skyrocket. But over the years, we have learned from our mistakes, and ever since the push of IDD and DfMA in Singapore, I can see that the designers have moved from a mindset of design cast in situ, then look into DfMA, into designing with DfMA in mind, and they have come up with fantastic designs like having the world's tallest DfMA or PPVC residential building in Clementi. So I think this is something that we also have to remember, that with BIM and we can make the process more efficacious, but I think the design has to be correct as well, so that the design methodology has to be correct, so that everything can actually flow from that. That would be my contribution. Thank you.
Okay. So
Sorry,
BIM is not only just helpful, it's necessary too. So, Fabian, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would totally agree that BIM is sort of a prerequisite for doing it properly. And I'm becoming a fan of Singapore right now because I think you have you have a well thought out framework already that I urgently need to review there. I was a bit puzzled with the terminology because I think DfMA is a means of making prefabrication actually better. So I can't see much that can go wrong with DfMA because it is a method of actually finding out how to do prefabrication, and especially digital prefabrication, right or wrong, and basically collect all the prerequisites and boundary conditions and sort of solve or try to solve this multi-objective optimization criteria that it creates. If you don't do it, then you will go wrong. I think when it comes to BIM, I see two main issues that we have at the moment. When it comes to assembly, we might have a language problem because BIM is mostly concerned with parts and not with joints. So we don't know how we put things together because we cannot describe that properly in BIM models most of the time, which makes a discussion about DfMA actually pretty hard when it comes down to BIM, because you cannot describe how things come together and you cannot analyze them and you cannot optimize them. And B, I think we have an issue when it comes to digital fabrication, because everything that I know in terms of digital fabrication, that's a lot of timber, but also other things where machinery, CNC fabrication equipment actually wants to work within some 1/10 of a millimeter tolerance in the end. And that's also necessary to meet all the joints and also the structural requirements that we have. And the question would be, how do you create fabrication data that's precise down to 1/10 of a millimeter from BIM models that are hardly ever precise down to, say, 5 millimeters to be on the safe side? Yeah, and I think we have a methodology problem here at some point that we urgently need to address.
Yeah.
You guys need to package it and sell it, Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a few things that we've mentioned and just go back to them. I mean, I'd like to perhaps illustrate some of these issues through examples. So thinking about the question about CO2 emissions, thinking about the question about productivity, thinking about the question about is DfMA the best solution always? The example I can give are based around an airport. So we became like a mini Singapore in that the client mandated that DfMA would take place, and the client set up off-site manufacturing facilities like Singapore. And what we're able to do is measure the productivity on site and determine that actually productivity on site was 10%. In terms of useful work, it was 10%, whereas in the factories it was 90%, because we were able to measure it and therefore make a direct comparison. And therefore, it was quite easy to make the decision to say, actually, it's more effective off-site. And then and therefore the amount of waste is less, and therefore the amount of carbon emissions are less. But then you get the whole dichotomy of, well, I've got to transport it. So transport is about putting things into the atmosphere. But overall, you're able to then make that assessment. But what we weren't able to do, and what I think most of the world is still not able to do, because they're not using interoperable seamless data, is allow all the different players in the supply chain for a new design to be able to assess their own data and work out whether what they're doing is most effective or not. And they're not able to escalate that data up the supply chain to the final decision makers to say, actually, this is the best approach. And this is where the open BIM approach will come in, because it will allow us to be able to share that data and make better decisions about the best way forward up and down the supply chain, bearing in mind that everybody will be using different software tools for the various things that they do.
I'm thinking about, well, I was sort of thinking about everything that we've discussed, and, there's all these good ideas, and it seems to me like at the beginning of a project, there is a design team, and they are probably the least well equipped, I think, to think about this stuff in terms of constructability. It's sort of the issue that we run into a lot of times in architecture with teams maybe that aren't as sophisticated, that haven't been in the field to see how things are put together, how things are manufactured. I'm wondering, and I'll put this to you, Lex, but from an educational standpoint, from a thinking about DfMA and all the benefits of it, what do you do to educate people that you work with, or get them to buy into this idea of, there's a better way, and there's a way that can save us money, your clients money, you time, CO2, shorten our schedule, whatever.
Well, as a person, I don't train them to do something with the DfMA, but I can help them to design a process, how to manage the information while doing FMA. So most of the time, it's a decision of the company. We do this project with prefabricated modules or prefabricated bathrooms, and my position is more how to let all the IFC files flow through the process, when to check which part, because if you have a prefabricated wall with some electrical equipment, some ducts, some bolts for the temporary scaffolding, they have already 4 suppliers in one object. So you need to coordinate different suppliers into a 3D environment in a certain way. So, and I've never seen a process like that on the buildingSMART summits. And I think next time we should invite, I can give you a list of companies to present their process as a manufacturer. I have some presentations here, but we don't have time for that. So, Valencia. You can. That's good. I think, and then also, for example, if you have a 100 million euro project, like the designers, they will cost maybe 10 million, but the rest of the 90 million, they go to the construction. So there's a lot of money, more money spent in the real construction for materials, but also for their process. So if you say the 90 million for the construction has also maybe 10 million in handling costs for the engineering. So if you can reduce that 10 million by 5 million by delivering a better design, then you're also making money on that part. And the better logistics, yeah. Also logistics, that's also interesting.
Yeah, I think now's a great time to be kind of pushing these ideas, because architects are now more than ever kind of open to ideas that help them get this stuff done more efficiently, because projects move so fast and in parallel tracks that you just can't. Just
going back to the education, I guess, Fabian, maybe you are have just recently taken over a professorship at Munich. So I'd like to really ask what is your intention with the professorship about this? Because this is exactly what you do. You do education, you do research. So it would be very interesting to hear what the next steps are. And I think from this point, it would be also very interesting to have kind of an understanding what we like to achieve, for example, in Valencia.
And introduction, we use all my colleagues in the Netherlands. They use the hamburger model. I don't know if Robert probably knows it. I can write it down on the paper.
Yeah, here we go. Whiteboard.
Here is a white paper. It's not an official standard yet, but just a simple concept that you have two parts of the. But if this is a building, you have the demand, something that the architects make, or like the architect, or the structural engineer, or the MEP. And together they are the demand for the building. Some space objects, rooms and spaces. And you can, if in my example of a 10 million euro project, this will cost like 10 million for the design. But the production of the construction works, they will probably cost you 90 million euro, it's a percentage, 90. But you can divide this in very small parts. For example, the MEP, there can be like 3 suppliers, one for the ventilation and for the sanitary, one for the electrical equipment, and they have to comply, they have to compare all the time if they meet the requirements from the demand to the supply. So if you look to BIM protocols, execution plans, or something like that in the Netherlands, they most of the time make this drawing, and then they say we have one architect, but we have like 20 suppliers, and we have one structural engineer, and that's how they design the process. It's a simple view, and if you compare it to the ISO 19650, you have like the A, and then you can have several Bs, like from a contract perspective. For example, this is the real estate developer, this is the general contractor, and this is the architect. And the general contractor, they hire maybe 150 suppliers, and you have to design a process how to manage this information in the schedule.
Well, I forgot what I'd like to say. That's stupid. But I think that what you just did with the drawing is exactly what the problem is. So, well, from my perspective, we should work on this process, but maybe we talk about design for manufacture assembly, and for me, for disassembly. So we talk not only about the project management, we talk about the production management, and this is the huge difference in between. So we start to talk about digital twins from a production-based understanding, where we have different production lines, which we need to combine and document it. And this is where the value comes in from the open BIM standards, you know. So what I'd like to do is also making a little bit of mind shift on that side, to stop to talk about just project management, go into an intelligent production in the system, and supports by the DfMA, which I think this could be a very strong approach for buildingSMART. But Fabian, you are smiling, I see you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for your question, and definitely teaching about this is definitely on my agenda. I have to figure out how, because I just started. But I think, I mean, when it comes to, and let's agree that we're talking about prefabrication and putting things together on site, which means the idea is to get complexity away from the building site and shift it forward in the process, and get it off site in one way or the other. So I think the crucial thing will be to stop talking about parts too much and start talking about the interfaces. Because if I have a prefabricated component, I actually don't care how it comes together. when we talk about software engineering, I define the functionality and I define the interfaces, and the rest is a black box that needs to work. So in the
Fabian,
end,
oh,
also
sorry,
we
go
need
ahead.
we need to discuss how things are coming together on site and how we describe this in digital models. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there at the end. We have just 5 minutes left in the session, so I wanted to give everybody on the panel a 60-second opportunity to just any closing thoughts that they had. And since we have you there, Fabian, if you had any thoughts overarching about DfMA to lay on us, go ahead and do that.
I think I just had my 30 seconds or 60.
Okay, I'll hand
That
it
was
on
the
to
message.
Wawan then.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, what Fabian says from education perspective, I think that gives me some ideas, because that's always kind of the issue. I am teaching part-time in a university, so maybe that gives me an idea. Maybe the next year course should include some issues about how we actually integrate this DfMA into the entire design and construction process.
So I would say that, the DfMA strategy has been in place in Singapore for some years now. We've had, quite a number of projects being pushed out using DfMA technology. And there are many people in Singapore who would have the experience, to be able to share more about the challenges and the benefits of DfMA applied to their projects. So, I am, of course, hoping that, we could all come to Singapore at some time and you would be able to meet them all.
That's a good idea.
I guess we had a very good session about understanding a little bit better what the challenges are. So I hope with regard on Singapore, we might learn from Singapore a little bit better, and we can get a step forward how buildingSMART can support all this thing we discussed it through. So handing this over to Richard.
So I think this has been a very good conversation, and amongst us all, we've fleshed out a lot of the opportunities, a lot of the problems, and I think we've got the ability amongst us to write a coherent paper that puts this all together in a structure that people could read and understand and go, blimey, yes, you're right, that would be good. Building on the experiences that we've had and what works, what doesn't, and all the rest of it. So my proposal is that I'm inviting anybody, and predominantly on this panel, or anybody in the room, to join us on a strategic group to write a white paper. And I would love it if we were able to get that white paper, say, a 7-minute read by the time we finished it, published in time for Valencia. So that's my offer. And you're on it.
Fabian, whether his students can help.
Go for it.
Fabian, here's another question. So, as this might be a shared interest of what you do at your professorship, what we intend to do with buildingSMART by the support of Singapore. So, do you think there is an option that we can maybe get a little help of your students?
It's a bit a question of a time frame, but let's come up with ideas.
Additional idea regarding students, and plus for Fabian, one more plus point to Singapore, because they are so he is fond of Singapore. Singapore in the past, I don't know, as a former participant of BIM competition for the DfMA, BCA, BIM building construction authority was organizing BIM and DfMA competition for students. Maybe it will be a new category for BSI or.
Okay, let's get
Is there any manufacturer in the room? Who's a manufacturer? Nobody? Who's a assembler? For concrete. Okay, that's. So I think if you write a white paper, Richard, then you should write
okay,
it
would
with.
that be something you'd like to participate on with us? Okay, great. That'd be good. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mabel.
I think if you will write a white paper,
Yeah,
then you should write it with manufacturers.
absolutely. Yeah, that's an open
assemblers.
invitation to everybody in the community. Yeah, definitely.
She keeps telling me 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
Can bring two manufacturers for prefabrication.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's more work to be done. Sounds like some people are gonna get together. We're gonna get a paper together. We're gonna meet again in Valencia and maybe have more DfMA discussions, which I think sounds great. So I want to thank everyone for online for attending and everybody on the panel for your time and expertise. I thought it was a really great conversation. I'm glad it's recorded because we were kind of all over the map, but all good stuff. So again, thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.